Hi there, I'm Stephanie Shanti, and in this little anatomy snack I'm going to tell you about two muscles that kind of help to stabilise the scapula and also help to move them both in towards the spine medially and out towards the ribs laterally. So these two muscles are the rhomboids and serratus anterior, and they kind of work like a tag team, sliding the shoulder blades in and out. Or we can call it protracting and retracting. So let's look at the first set, which is the rhomboids. So the rhomboids join the medial border of the scapula. So this is the scapula, the shoulder blade. The medial border is the border closest to the spine. So these rhomboids join this medial border of the scapula to C7, which is the last cervical vertebra or the last vertebra of the neck. C7, T1, T2, T3, T4, and sometimes T5. And obviously there's discrepancies. Different people have different attachments. So they're kind of attaching sort of diagonally and upwards. So this tells us a lot. Just knowing where the muscles attach from and to tells us that when this muscle contracts, those 2 points are going to be brought towards each other. So when these rhomboids contract, the medial border of the scapula is going to be brought towards the spine. And because they're slight kind of diagonal in orientation, so kind of in this kind of direction, not just horizontal, we know that they're going to slightly lift and draw the shoulders back into what we call retraction of the shoulder blades, scapular retraction. So that's the rhomboids. When these 2 points move together, the shoulder blades move back towards the spine. So retraction. So in yoga setting, that would be, we'd see that in kind of back benders or heart openers. So if we're thinking bow pose, if we're thinking dancer pose, we're thinking cactus arms, we're thinking taking the arms behind us, even kind of reverse tabletop where you're pushing the hands down into the floor. Anywhere when you're squeezing, actively squeezing the shoulder blades towards each other, then you are using the rhomboids. Then when you want to stretch those, you'd be doing the opposite action. So anything that stretches the rhomboids is going to be protracting the shoulder blades. So retracting, bringing them back, protracting, moving the shoulder blades forwards, so away from the spine. So that means this space between the medial border of the scapula and those vertebrae, C7 to T5, those points are moving further away from each other, which means those fibers of the muscles are kind of lengthening. So that would be the opposite, right? So that would be, if you think of angry cat, where you're pushing into the floor, if I'm kind of pushing my hands into the floor against gravity, for example, in crow pose, that would be kind of stretching and lengthening the rhomboids. Now the rhomboids get very, very tight. They're usually very, very tight in normal life because they're what we call often locked long. So they're often kind of in a stretched position because if you think about how muscles work, they work against gravity to try and lift us back. So muscles switch on against gravity. What they're trying to do is keep us up in space, keep our bones balanced in gravity. And then when we're in gravity, they don't have to work so hard. So in normal life, my tendency is to come forward, round my shoulders forward and down. I'm either on the computer like this, or I'm aging. Gravity's pulling me back towards the earth. So these rhomboids, they're often very, very tight because they're constantly switching on to try and pull me back up. So they get what we call locked long. So we often find a lot of tension here. So that's the rhomboids. They are joining from the medial border of the scapula to the spine from C7 to T5. So that's like Batman and Robin. I don't know if it's Batman and Robin because they're both really important. Anyway, they're a tag team. They are called the Serratus Anterior, and these also join from the medial border of the scapula. And these go underneath the scapula, so in between the ribs and the scapula, and they join to the ribs. They join kind of like in these kind of serrations, that's why they're called serratus anterior, kind of scissor-like projections that come down the 8 or 9 top ribs. So this is kind of keeping the shoulder blade attached to the ribs. The rhomboids are keeping the shoulder blade attached to the spine, and between them, they're doing this little tug of war. So these serrations come from the medial border of the scapula to those ribs, the top 8 or 9 ribs. And so they are doing the opposite job. So it's quite easy to think of these together. So if I'm bringing those 2 points where they start and where they join, so that's the medial border of the scapula to the outer edge, the lateral portion of the rib cage, when I shorten them, or when I bring those 2 points together, that's the action of contracting, we can say, the serratus. So it's going to be the things that are opposite to the rhomboid. So when I'm stretching rhomboids, I might be contracting serratus. And I say I might be because it depends really where your focus is. You can be moving these things and not contracting, or other muscles can be contracting. But we can think of it as I'm going to switch on my serratus when I am protracting, actively protracting the shoulder blades, because I'm actually bringing the medial border of the scapula towards the outer ribs. So I'm switching them on. So that's like the crow, the angry cat. And then I'm going to be stretching serratus. I'm going to be lengthening serratus. Instead of shortening, I'm moving the medial border away from the rib cage when I'm doing things like, hang on, I just got muddled up there. when I'm retracting, I'm opening, I'm shortening the rhomboids, and I'm opening, I'm lengthening the serratus. So I am actually, when I'm moving the medial border of the scapula away from the rib cage towards the spine, which is the action of the rhomboids, I'm actually stretching the serratus. So there would be like heart opening or little back bending. All the things that switch on rhomboids are stretching serratus potentially, and all the things that are stretching rhomboids are switching on serratus potentially. So we can think of also the other job of the serratus as kind of pulling the medial border of the scapula in towards the spine. Because this kind of, the serratus anterior kind of hooking at the back, they can also pull back the medial border, or pull down the medial border of the scapula to kind of nicely tuck that medial border of the scapula onto the spine. So people have winging of the scapula where the medial border kind of sticks out. If you switch on serratus, it also, as well as pulling it towards the ribs, it's also pulling it down flat onto the back. So these are the actions that are moving and sliding the shoulder blades in towards the spine and out towards the ribs. But also when we weight bear on our hands, they both switch on to kind of stabilize and hold the scapula on the back of the body, on the rib cage. So they're neither of them are lengthening or shortening when we're weight bearing. But if we're kind of really contracting them, and if, in a natural setting, when we weight bear, they will switch on just naturally to stabilize. So we'd call this an isometric contraction, where the muscle's neither lengthening nor shortening, but it is really active and switched on. And so between them, they help to stabilize the scapula. So let's now think of ways we can work. So I'm going to move my friend away here. So ways we can work the rhomboids, we've been through the yoga poses, we can do the back bends. Against gravity is always going to be really good for a muscle. So if I'm on the floor and I'm doing kind of, if I do cobra pose without pushing on the hands, but I'm really making my rhomboids lift me up, that's going to help. So that's against gravity, back bends against gravity. And then if I want to really activate serratus and rhomboids, what I can do are these things called scapular push-ups. So we can do scapular push-ups in kind of a half plank pose. So let's say we took hands and knees, and then we moved our hands about hand width forward. We moved our hips forward, and I'm going to stabilize the spine. So rather than cat and cow, where I'm kind of moving the spine, I'm going to stabilize, neutralize the spine. I'm going to use also my core to make it really hard. I can have my feet flat where I can tuck them in. And I'm just going to practice active retraction of the shoulder blades and protraction of the shoulder blades. So I drop my chest. I'm not curling my spine at all. I'm just squeezing my shoulder blades in towards the spine, and then I'm pushing my hands into the floor and moving away from the spine. So this gets them really fired up, and it's quite a good way of kind of building up strength in those scapular stabilizers. And if I did it in full plank, again, I'm not rounding my spine. My spine is neutral. I'm using my core, my thigh muscles, my lower abdominals to lift me up, and I'm just retracting and protracting my shoulder blades. That's quite effortful. And so then if we wanted to kind of roll out some tension or do some myofascial release into these trigger points, we can work on serratus in a really nice way by using a block, and you might want to have a blanket on top of the block to make it a little bit kinder. The serratus comes out at the side. They kind of finish at the side ribs. So if I kind of place the block on my side ribs, so there's a little bit of space above my armpit, before I get to the block, and I'm just kind of reclining here like a Roman. And I've got enough of the block behind me that I can roll backwards and forwards. And I will at some point, I can have my hand on the floor, I can have my hand on my hip, my head's just laying on the palm of my hand. I will kind of roll over those scissor-like projections of the serratus. And this can be really nice just to soften those serratus ends. And you can do that on both sides. That's a really nice, really easy way to release tension, or you can do it before you start working them to kind of switch them on, get some awareness of those muscles. That can be really useful for your students. So that's a really nice way of doing some myofascial release in the serratus. And then when it comes to the rhomboids, this is a favourite of most people, and it can be quite intense, but using the myofascial release balls, you kind of place them on your mat together, and then quite a lot of people will need a blanket over the top just to soften this kind of effect. So you can kind of make a little sausage-like kind of roll, just to give it a nice soft covering, the balls. And what you'll do is you'll try and lie down so that these balls are going to be kind of level with the armpit, close to the spine, is going to be somewhere in that area that we've seen before. If I go in level with the armpit there, the balls will be somewhere here, and a give or take up or down, I'm going to be on those rhomboids as long as I'm kind of in the medial border, between the medial border of the spine and the spine, between the medial border of the scapula and the spine. So if I kind of have that vaguely near where my armpits lie, and then lie back on them, and then I can have a block under my head, and I'm going to feel it quite quickly that I'm on those muscles. So with this kind of myofascial release, I can have my knees bent, I could have my legs straight, but I quite like to just limit any tension in the rest of the spine. If I just lie here and breathe, that's really nice because I'm just giving that nice compression. I can also add some movement, so I'm doing what we call shearing. So I'm kind of forcing the skin layer to stay and then forcing the muscle to move underneath. So I could do any of those movements that I know come from the rhomboid. So cactus arms, I can go into cactus, and I can, so cactus is going to bring the shoulder blades in towards those balls. I can really feel the medial border of the shoulder blade kind of sticking into the balls. And then if I hug, I'm moving the shoulder blades away from the balls. So that is the action of the rhomboids contracting and stretching. So the muscles moving under the balls. So this is called shearing. I can also kind of do some nice kind of movements like this. Hello. Come to join the anatomy snack. She's got very good shoulder blades, of course. Cats have got great action. And I can also roll up and down a little bit. So I'm just kind of lifting my bum a little bit up off the floor and rolling up and down. There's not that much space between the shoulder blades, but if I kind of roll an inch or two, then I'm actually what we call cross-fibering. So because my rhomboids are going kind of laterally, and I am moving up and down, then I'm going across those fibers, and that's very nice. Most people really love this. It's nice to do that a little bit, and then release, and then again lie flat and take some breaths and just feel the difference. So we've got ways to actively kind of work into the serratus and the rhomboids with our scapular push-ups. We've got ways to stretch and contract those with our combination of kind of pushing away and heart opening poses, and we've got ways to compress and release the fascia of those tissues with our kind of serratus anterior rolling on the block and rhomboids rolling on the ball. So I hope this was useful, and let me know if you want any other little anatomy snacks, and I'll see you next time.